Joining me now to talk politics is political columnist John Brummett with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Happy New Year.
Well,
I should point out to you, you're a renowned sports commentator through your Twitter feed, too.
It's one of my favorite things.
I know.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that earns you the most, I think, talked about points. You
really?
know? Yeah.
You think my tweets on the Razorbacks have higher readership than my columns on politics?
I'm not answering that question.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk about what's going on in the state legislature. While we were with the governor this week for a reporters conference, we actually found out that Micah Neal, State Representative Micah Neal, basically said, I did indeed take bribes on all this. This is a pretty big deal. We knew that this story was out there for a while, but this is the chapter we've kind of been waiting to see close and more to come.
It's got a couple of elements, but one is there has been nervousness and sort of percolating worry in the legislature for, I think, maybe up to 2 years, a year and a half, that the federal prosecutors, federal authorities were looking into state legislators with their general improvement money, which is the money they take for themselves and route it through planning and economic development districts for their personal projects, that they were investigating kickbacks, that they were actually, in delivering this state money, which they shouldn't have been doing in the first place, there were reports that some were actually getting some of it back personally. And then that was compounded by these reports that there were other issues too having to do with behavioral health companies in this, and it's sort of just a smelliness to a lot of the state's Medicaid contracting and maybe some legislative involvement or lobbyist involvement. So what this was lame duck Representative Micah Neal, who did not run again, acknowledged that he had taken money back in concert with an unnamed senator, with some involvement by an unnamed lobbyist, both of whom were described in in the information about him in a way that you know who they are, but I'm not going to say.
Right. Innocent until proven guilty.
Right. Yeah. And so it's up to the federal government to name the names. So the issue is, how big is this? What is this the start of? And a couple of years ago, people were saying there was a vast public corruption issue arising in Arkansas. That I don't know.
We'll see if it comes.
But this was, and just to back up, the General Improvement Fund is money. That's the state surplus money. Right. They're always
typically goes to one-time projects.
It does, and it used to go just to the governor or to state agencies for state building or capital improvement projects. With my shameful support, at one point back in the 80s or early 90s, Nick Wilson and Bob Johnson and some others took some of the money from Governor Huckabee, and so that legislators could have their own projects. Then they were told by courts they couldn't do that, so they started this charade of running it through these planning and development districts, which would then release the money pursuant to the directives of the legislators. Governor Hutchinson says he thinks we will not have any general improvement money in this budget, and we shouldn't. The whole concept, the idea of legislators having their own personal pots of money for what I call their play pretties, simply should not happen.
It doesn't sound like it's going to, and I think there'll be too much pressure on the legislature for it to happen this time around. All right, we've got to take a quick commercial break. We can come back and talk some national politics right after this. I'm with John Brummett with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. More talk business and politics after this word from our sponsors. Welcome back. We're talking politics with John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Let's turn our attention to the nation's capital. Congress goes back in this past week, off to a little bit of a sloppy start, would you say, for the Republicans?
Off to an unbelievable start. Yeah, I assume you're referring to on the day before they went into session, the Republican conference met and voted by what was a secret ballot. We can't find out how they voted because it was a secret conference, to abolish the independent agency office set up to investigate ethics complaints against members of Congress, to abolish it and put it under the aegis of the House Ethics Committee.
This was a burning campaign issue all for the last year, right?
Yeah, throughout the campaign.
Right, not.
We're going to feed the swamp, I think is what they said. We're going to make the swamp worse, or we're going to regulate the swamp ourselves. And the outcry was, they said, the reasoning for it ostensibly, is that this independent agency had gotten out of control and wasn't extending due process, and there were unfair anonymous complaints made on a partisan basis, and it needed to be reined in. Well, the people didn't go for that.
Right.
When the first thing you do, when you're taken over fully, you got the president and the Congress completely. When the first thing you do is meet in private and rein in the group that is authorized to investigate your ethical performance, somebody should have noticed, and I think Paul Ryan did.
Yeah.
This is probably not
going to work out
They had
good.
to take it back the next day.
Let's talk about I'm going to give you some choices here because there's been so much to talk about at the national level. You've got now the wall is maybe not going to be paid for by Mexico, although Donald Trump says it's going to be paid for them by later.
Right.
With Obamacare, we're going to repeal and maybe not replace it, maybe delay it. You've got the whole Russian situation.
Which one you want me to talk
you
about?
pick one, the one that you want to talk about the most.
What was the first one?
The first one was the wall.
Oh, well, during the campaign, I will just tell you this. I went out and did a piece for your magazine finding Trump supporters in Arkansas early and saying, why? Why are you for this guy? And do you really believe he's going to build a wall? And most of these folks said, and make Mexico pay for it, and most of them said, he's at least got to try. But when he says he's going to make Mexico pay for it, that probably means that he's going to extract something from them in some sort of trade penalty or some sort of indirect method of
Not
payment.
send me a check.
Right. Rather than Mexico saying, okay, build it and we will cover the charges, that they were pretty well resigned that he was talking about something else. So we'll see about that. But I do. That was out there before the election, the idea that the Mexican payment would be a reimbursement, an indirect after the fact reimbursement. Obamacare, here's my Sunday column. Trump said repeal and replace. Hillary Clinton said fix, keep it and fix it. I think what the Republicans are going to do is repeal it to great fanfare, to great conservative celebration. Repeal it, but delay the repeal for 2 years so that nobody notices anything different. And during those 2 years, construct something to replace it that will be more a fix than a replacement.
I think you're right about that.
I think there will be no individual mandate. They just don't like that, and I think they're going to change Medicaid to block grants, but I think the exchanges, the money for expanded Medicaid, coverage for pre-existing conditions, coverage under your parents' plans to 26, et cetera, I think they're going to put healthy increments of that back. But what they want in the interim is the big headline when they repeal it.
That's
when they
right.
repeal what
That's
they're
right.
going to basically put back.
All right, he's John Brummett with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Online, after this show is over, we're going to talk about your relationship with Stanley Russ, who passed away late this week. So everybody check that out online at talkbusiness.net. That is all for this show. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time. Welcome back to this Web Extra. I'm Roby Brock with John Brummett, and we were talking on Sunday. We wanted to talk a little bit more about Stanley Russ, former state senator from Conway, passed away late last week. You spent a lot of time with Stanley Russ, probably your first political interview.
In 1975, my first political article, in 1975 I was a sports editor as a Cub reporter, Cub sports editor of the Log Cabin Democrat in Conway. There was a special election to replace the ousted Senator Guy H. Mutt Jones from the state senate. Conway is a state senator. Stanley Russ was the Faulkner County candidate against the Conway County favored Sheriff Marlon Hawkins candidate in a runoff. And the newspaper assigned me my first ever fate-changing, life-changing political story, which was to spend that night with Stan Russ and write about his attitude, his thinking in that evening. And I met him at the Faulkner County Courthouse where he checked the boxes and it showed that he had won overwhelmingly in Faulkner County. But he said to me, I said, well, that's good, isn't it? You know, he said, it may not be good enough. It depends on what they're going to steal from me up in Conway County. And I thought, this is better than sports reporting. I mean, we're dealing with great human drama here. And he said, I don't say this for my own benefit, just to say that he always said that in his personal scrapbook, that article was his favorite because he said, I captured the level of that night, how concerned he was about whether he would have the election taken from him.
And what did happen that night?
He held on.
Yep.
The Faulkner County vote was overwhelming, so was the Conway County vote, but Faulkner County had a lot more votes than Conway County, and he held on and won by 500 votes out of 12,000. He and I became friends. He ran for Congress. I covered that. He was in the state Senate. He didn't get elected to Congress. He was in the state Senate. I was assigned to the state capitol in 1980, and just a wonderful, wonderful man.
Yeah. What do you think he'd be remembered for? How he conducted himself? And
he'll be remembered as for just more than decency, just a good man, just a very good man. And he'll also be remembered because he was, as my first story I told you about, he was the agent of reform from the old politics. And I had the great honor to get a call from him from his home hospice bed last week, and it was a conversation, you know, I'm writing about it in the Tuesday column.
Okay.
That meant a great deal to me. He's a fine, fine man. Very conservative, but I get along with a lot of conservatives, and I always have. Not all of them, but some. But I love Stan Russ, and a lot of people did.
All right, John Brummett, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it
You
very
bet.
much. All right. And that is all for this Web Extra. Thank you for watching. Keep up with the latest from business and politics each and every day at talkbusiness.net. I'm Roby Brock. Thanks for watching.